Talk to me nice, talk to me honestly.
G'day Art Snackers, my name is James of James Luke Burke Creative. Great to see you again. Welcome to another month of ArtSnacks Box Freestyle, where we take the supplies from the ArtSnacks Plus box from March 2021, experiment with them to within an inch of their lives, and fingers crossed create a masterpiece with them for the hashtag ArtSnacks Challenge. Today's little tidbit of information to get to know each other just a little bit better is where I get my inspiration from. It's a question I get asked a lot, and my typical response is pretty much anywhere. I'm most inspired by people's passion, even if it's interdisciplinary creative arts, but I also have a really extensive collection of concept art books, mostly Disney movie or Disney film, Disney anything really, coffee table books that are full of concept art, and I love to be inspired by them. I think it's something about all of the different collaborators coming in on one project and having all these different visions that makes me really excited about looking at those. So that is where I get inspired by a lot of the time. I also love to flip through pages. I'm a bit more tangible than I am digital. Anyway, that's where I get my inspiration from, and my question for you is, where do you get yours from? Okay, let's go to the March 2021 box and have a look at what's inside. Alrighty, here is the March 2021 ArtSnacks Plus box. Here's everything inside, and inside the little green burrito, this is what we'll be playing with today. So in the Plus box, we're going to start with the Fabriano 1264 Mixed Media Spiral Bound Paper Pad. That's 7 by 10 inches, 60 pages of 160 GSM. Marabou Graphics Permanent Sketch Markers, significant set of 12. That is also one of the ArtSnacks Plus items for March. We have the Plumchester Paint Marker. I got the teal. It's a 3mm and also a 5mm chisel tip. This is a Kudetake Zig AI liner brush pen in black. A Chameleon Color Tones colored pencil. I got this orange, which is papaya and kumquat. We have the KUM Cube 3 pencil sharpener, which I use to sharpen the Blackwing that's about to pop up, and it's a very good pencil sharpener. We have the ArtSnacks and Palomino Blackwing special happy birthday present. And we have our Snacks and ArtSnacks sticker. Wow, that's always just very hard to say. Okay, let's clear that out of the way and get ourselves set up to experiment. Another month of box freestyle means another month to explore the art supplies in the box, not only by themselves, but mixing them with their friends in the box, and also looking at different applications, like for instance, the smudging. I usually like to start with the graphite, press light and press hard, and see how light and dark I can get that pencil. Then I'll smudge it out and erase it, because that's just really important to know how easily you can correct your mistakes. But I want to try that first, and then also just another application, that lettering there, if you see the Palomino written underneath. If you do vary up the pressure in how hard and light you press with that pencil, you can achieve a really light line and then a very heavier bold line. So you can get that line weight variation that you get with brush pens. So it's this way to, quote unquote, brush letter with a pencil. So if you've never tried that before, that is a pretty effective technique to try. Much like you do with brush lettering, the light upstrokes and the heavy downstrokes, you can do the same thing with a pencil and still get that effect. I was testing out the markers to see the colors and to just layer them a little bit, see how they worked. Very beautiful. And this is the Plumchester paint marker. This time I did remember to flip the nib to try the chisel tip. Only I accidentally primed it before I remembered to do that specifically, so I did have to flip it over when I'd already primed it. But you can still, you saw from what I did, it just bubbles up a little bit and then you have to, wipe your hands and you'll be fine. So you can flip the nib even once you've primed it. There you go, I've tested that for you. This Kudetake Zig liner brush was so incredible. I have never seen anything like it before. Besides the fact that it looks like a little liner brush for your makeup kit, it is so fine. It's like the finest tipped brush liner I've ever seen. It does say it's a pigment-based ink. I'm only going to touch on that for a second because I wanted to tell you about something that I think is very important for these kind of experimentation processes and why I like them. But yeah, I'm super impressed with that brush liner. The chameleon pencil up there, my 2 tones of orange were, only a few shades apart from each other, so I can totally understand why those are really great for blending. It was almost kind of seamless. I didn't really have to worry about being good at blending. It just worked. So I could see how having a set of those would be really great if you wanted to practice more of those gradient blends. This, we've done the Palomino Blackwing, we did the markers. Oh, that's what I was going to talk about, the markers. So the markers, I wanted to know if they were a bit more of a friend of Sharpie or if they were kind of distant cousins of Copic marker, because it does say that they're alcohol-based. The thing is, as with all of the supplies, the chemical mix, like the kind of formulation of everything, even though we have one pigment black pen, doesn't mean all pigment black pens are the same. And it doesn't mean that just because one is alcohol-based marker, like a Copic, is going to be the same as this alcohol-based Marabou graphics marker. That being said, it's not a problem, they're just different, but it is good to test and do these experimentations beforehand, because sometimes we can go in with these preconceived notions that, okay, I've got a pigment, waterproof pigment marker here, the brush marker, it shouldn't react with anything, when in fact these specific markers act more of a solvent. The alcohol in those kind of eats away at that stuff, so it's not bad, but it will react with that pigment black liner. So it's not, like I said, I'm going to keep stressing this, it's not a bad thing. Neither of these things were made wrong, but sometimes our ideas about, just because it's pigment ink and that it says it's waterproof means it's going to be, impermeable to everything. That's not necessarily the case. Sometimes it does react, and that is why it's good to test these things out first, just so you know, because if you know, you can apply the solution before you get to the problem. So that is a really good thing to test everything for. Here I accidentally almost ruined that orange by putting it in wet paint. Don't do as I do. If you quickly sketch it off, it should be fine. But yeah, that was one of those things that I just wanted to point out, that just because we know something, these things change all the time. There are new techniques, new technologies, new supplies, new materials coming out all the time, and we get to put them into our toolbox, and sometimes it can be a bit of a rude shock when something doesn't happen the way we expect it to. But that kind of is to be expected as it changes, right? So give yourself a good head start and a good chance to do well by just doing some of these tests sometimes. When you put something new in there, you don't have to test absolutely everything in your toolbox, but just grab the things that you like to work with the most, that are kind of the staples of your creative playtime, and see how they react with that, because you might just learn that, this happens, so maybe I can't use it for that, or maybe I should use it for something different. For me, the fix was draw the colors first with the markers and then do the lining over the top. That's not a problem for me. I'm glad that I knew that so that I could, not find that out when I was doing my final piece and having lined the whole thing and then getting really nervous about the coloring. Other things that I found were with these transparent markers, you could layer them kind of like a Venn diagram and get their secondary colors blended onto the page. So that actually was kind of really interesting, and I was taken with that to the point where that is what I ended up basing my final piece off. So these experimentations are also good for stimulating ideas and being your inspiration. One of the other things I will point out that I found during this process, something super interesting I've never thought of before, every time I use black on the page, like a black marker, black ink or something, I think the only way I can work over the top of it is with a light white pen or like a pastel color or pastel pencils, and I found that the graphite went right over the top and acted like a light gray. So I didn't realize that. It's kind of an interesting effect too, because the gray of the graphite is kind of reflective in certain light, so it almost acts as like a metallic kind of gray. I'd never occurred to me. Every time I use black on the page, I grab all of my light colored supplies, so I would never have grabbed the pencil. But trying that today has now opened my eyes to that technique. Even though I didn't use it in the end piece, that is something that I learnt from today's experimentation that I would absolutely have a go at using in the future. So now we've got the Hobonichis come out, we're doing our little thumbnail sketches. I'm going to go through a few and see what we're going to do for our final piece. So I picked this little layout here. I wanted to keep it quite simple and let the techniques speak for themselves today. I've got this four character lineup. They're going to be next to each other and crossing over. I wanted to use that what was it called? That kind of layering, that Venn diagram effect, where the secondary colors are blended on the page. I wanted to use that with the markers. I also wanted to add in some of those textures, like that smudgy kind of face. I wanted to use that really beautiful liner pen to add lots of details that had a really varied line weight kind of a look. So we'll kind of watch this happen as it goes. I was going to tell you where this came from, because these characters, although they look like cute little ballerinas, which they kind of are, they have a much more significant backstory for me, and I thought I'd share it with you today, just in the interest of getting to know each other as best we can. So when I was a little boy, I loved to dance. I loved to play dress-ups. I loved to do everything. But one of my favorite times of the year was around Easter time, because we would go to the Royal Easter Show, and so it's this big agricultural show in Sydney. You go and there's lots of I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a big fair, and they did it at the Sydney Showgrounds. Anyway, so we would go. I would get these show bags, so there'd be lots of lollies in there, lots of candy, and lots of little toys and trinkets, and we would just have a great day there. But one of my favorite parts of the Royal Easter Show, it's twofold. One, I got the tinsel tiara, which is kind of the only time of the year that I got my tinsel tiara. It was almost like a little garland of tinsel that you would see on your Christmas tree that was made into a little crown, and then it had these really long flowing tinsel bits at the end, like just on the back. So I would live a very reflective, very attention-seeking Rapunzel fantasy. And I might add, I was probably, 6 years old? 8 years old? 14 years old? No, so my tinsel tiara was a big part of my fantasy. But not only that, I would love to get these little Cupid dolls on a stick. I don't know why they were such a fair thing, or if that even translates outside of Australia, but it was those Cupid dolls, from back in the day, and they would put glitter on their head, so they were really sparkly. They'd have a little glittery bodice, and they'd have a really glittery head, and then they would have this tutu, this tulle kind of gathered around their waist, and it had this massive tutu, and then they were on a dowel rod, like a big stick, so you would just kind of hold this Cupid doll on a stick. And so that was it. That was my full fantasy. I had my show bags on my wrist, I had my tinsel tiara trailing in the wind, and I had my Cupid doll on a stick while my twin brother was riding the Haunted Mansion somewhere. We had different fantasies. But yeah, that is kind of the backstory as to what these were reminding me of and why I decided to dive into that. I don't always make it my mission to kind of put these personal meanings into everything I do. A lot of the time when I do art, it would be a big misconception to think that I'm only doing art so that I can express these kind of personal stories. As I become more of an art journaler, I do find ways to be inspired by those memories and to kind of, imbue some of that feeling of nostalgia and joy into the piece. But it's not one of those things that I really sit down and consider and think about before I start. I think at the end of the day, if you're always kind of leaning into what you enjoy about the process and the subject matter that you enjoy, it's inevitable that something very close to that subject matter that you've enjoyed for so long will spark something, will spark some kind of an idea. But it is not something that I make a mission to do. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm kind of, I guess, speaking to people like myself at one point in life who thought that the only reason we could do art or that we should share it is because there was some hidden, deeper, bigger meaning of, to it all. And I really don't believe that. I think there absolutely can be, and I think a lot of the time there's beautiful meanings to a lot of what people create. But sometimes for me, some of the best meaning I can have behind a piece is that it brought me great joy and great comfort one day to sit down and, color in for half an hour, get an old coloring book and sit down and just enjoy myself, that I gave myself an hour to relax and I could paint a picture. That is also a great reason to do it and a great why. So if you're someone like me who used to think that you needed to have these really philosophical and groundbreaking and super personal reasons to be creating and sharing, you know, absolutely, that's a great thing if you want to go and do it. But you can also just do it because it's fun, because you enjoy it, because you like to open the box of new supplies, because you like to play with it all, you like the feeling of trailing a pencil across a piece of paper. I mean, I've gotten more into this finger smudging, there you go, speak of. I've gotten more into it because I'm getting more and more into the feeling of the supplies and the papers and everything. Every month this new substrate comes and I just want to feel how that paper is different to the other paper. I get my hands in there. I use finger painting, which I would never have done since I was a kid. But I'm trying to get really into it just because that's a part of the process for me. That's a part of the joy and that's a part of the why. And I think it is totally good enough. It doesn't have to mean more than that if you don't want it to. So, you know, I share that story just to say that, you know, during the piece, that kind of memory was triggered, and that's what I love about art journaling, is that I could then go on a bit of a, you know, a bit of a personal journey through that memory and kind of write about it and talk about it and reflect on it in my journaling. But at the same time, I love that that's a trigger for this piece. Like, I love that that's what kind of brought up those memories for me. And then I can dive deeper into that meaning if I choose to, or I could just let it live there and think, oh yeah, it must have just been living in the back of my head somewhere. Maybe that's why I'm attracted to it. Maybe that's why it's sparking these good feelings, and that's why I keep drawing them, because it's just in the back of my brain. It's these little Cupid dolls that remind me of the Royal Easter Show. Sometimes I think it's a little more subconscious because I have lots of really crazy vivid dreams. And my mum was talking to me about the Royal Easter Show recently, so I don't really know, you know, I don't really know how subconscious it is, but it is totally good enough just to have a great time. And if something sparks from it, if it relates to you in some way that you didn't intend for it to, great. If it doesn't, also great. I just want to validate both of those standpoints for you today, because I remember for a long time I thought it had to mean a lot more than that, and I kind of felt like a bit of a fraud if it didn't. But at the same time, it is good enough to just sit down and play with the supplies, because that's a great way for you to relax or to enjoy your time. And with that being said, I do hope you find some time today to sit down, pull out all your art supplies, grab your ArtSnacks box, open it up, get all the supplies out, and just have fun creating, experimenting, playing, pushing the supplies around the page. I hope you find some time for that today. There we go, that's our final piece for today. I hope you enjoyed watching that come together, and if you would like to join ArtSnacks, don't forget to use the code JAMES10 at checkout for 10% off, and you can also share your work with us using the hashtag ArtSnacksChallenge on social media and in the Mix community as well. I hope to see you again next month for another box freestyle. Until then, goodbye.